What's up guys, exciting video for you. We did it, we finally did it. I have built my dream 7-inch long range quad. I spared no expense, I cut no corners, and I honestly think I have built one of the best 7-inch quads. So without further ado, let me show you the parts and we will get this build knocked out. For motors for this build, I probably went with what's considered the gold standard for long range builds. This is the Brother Hobbies Avenger. It's the 2806.5 1300 kV. From what I've seen, this is probably the sweet spot for long range quads, so we'll see how these do. For ESC, we're going to go with the Hobbywing 65 amp ESC and then their F7 flight controller. At the time of purchasing everything, I was under the assumption that this stuff was indestructible, and then I did have one fail in a 5-inch quad. So we're going to see how these hold up in my long range quad. If they do start to fail, or if I notice something is happening that I don't like, I will switch to that immediately, because I did have a lot of trust in them. And then they kind of lost that trust, so we'll see how this holds up. And then for a receiver, I believe there's only one option for this. We went with a RadioMaster XR4, and we're going to pair that with their Nomad module in our RadioMaster Boxer, just to make sure we have no issues with interference or anything like that. So looking forward to getting this in the quad. This would be my first Gemini receiver. So for batteries, as I'm sure you guys know, you could go down a huge rabbit hole of batteries. A lot of people will say build your own battery over purchasing a battery, but I wasn't really sure about the top plate size of this quad, so I did just play it safe and purchase one 4,500 milliamp hour battery. The reason I say I'm not sure about the top plate size is it's kind of a newer frame, but I'll get into that later. So it is a 4,500 milliamp hour battery, and it claims that it's a 70 amps output, so we'll put this to the test and see if this is a good battery. If you have any recommendations, leave it down below for me. Then going off batteries and top plates, I went with a frame choice that I'm kind of skeptical about. Upon purchasing this frame, there wasn't that much information out about it. So this is the Lumenier QAV-S 2 Johnny FPV edition, but it is their 7-inch frame. So when I purchased this frame, there's honestly only one video out about the 5-inch frame. I haven't seen anything about the 7-inch frame, and my fear is that the 7-inch is actually just a 5-inch with 7-inch arms, similar to how the Apex 7-inch is. If you know anything about that quad, it's just a 5-inch with the 7-inch arms, and people have a lot of complaints about it. The main complaint is that it's a 7-inch build that people want to do long range with, but you have a 5-inch top plate which inhibits the batteries that you could run. So if that's the case, I'm not 100% sure what I'll do. I'll probably run it for a little while and see how it goes. But for right now, we are going to use the QAV-S 2 Johnny FPV edition, and we'll see how this frame builds out. And then, like I said in the beginning, I really spared no expense with this build. This is my first 7-inch long range frame. So I'm not really sure what I'm getting myself into, and to prepare for that, I really just went out and I bought every single 7-inch propeller that I could find, and we're going to test them all and we're going to see what works out the best. So all of the 7-inch propellers. Then last but not least, but of course continuing on with the theme that there really isn't much information out about that frame, for GPS we went with the GEP RC M1025. I don't know if this GPS is going to be too large for the frame or how it's going to fit on the back, but if that is the case and it's too large, again, learning experience, we will substitute this out for something else. Then along with the frame, we got their O4 kit to be able to mount an O4 inside, mandatory arm LEDs, and then last but not least, our long range antennas went with the Lumenier AXIS 2 long range antennas, and then the SMA to UFL connectors for that. So that's the part list for the quad. Let's jump into this build and see how it goes. Like I previously mentioned, there really isn't anything that I could find about this frame at the time of recording, so let's get into the unboxing. We'll actually see what we have. Wow. This frame actually comes with a parts list and instructions. That is a rare thing to find nowadays, is an actual instruction booklet inside the packet. So This looks like our bag of accessories, so standoffs, battery pad, our battery straps. The cool thing about this frame is it actually allows you to either mount a GoPro off the back, your GPS, your antennas out the back. It's actually a cool little design that they did with this frame. Then this is the locking system for the arms, and the I believe that's going to be our O4 mount, the camera cage. Very nice finish on these parts. And $1 million question answer, this is the top plate. Obviously this is a 5-inch quad top plate. So it looks like this frame is going to be a 5-inch build with 7-inch arms. So we'll see how that fares. Kind of disappointed that they didn't do a true 7-inch frame like a Chimera 7. You know how it has the longer top plate, but we'll see how this works out. Then of course, split plate design. Can't go wrong. And then our monstrous 7-inch arms. Also, one question that I did have for Lumenier that they did actually answer me about was the mounting holes for these arms. I wasn't sure if it was just 16 by 16 mounting or 19 by 19 like the Brother Hobby motors. They did email me back before purchasing. It is 16 by 16 up to 19 by 19. So these arms will work with the motors that I purchased. Overall, really not a bad experience unboxing the quad. Everything's packaged nice and neat. Everything's wrapped up separately according to how you build the quad. Like I said before, the only one thing that I would have liked to know about beforehand was that it is a 5-inch quad with a 7-inch arm kit. But not gonna knock the frame too much now. We'll see how this fares. No promises if this is or isn't the last time I bring this up, because I honestly would have liked to known this before I purchased the quad, but it is what it is. So this is a 5-inch quad with a standard size top plate, and then this is the top plate from the QAV-S. So as you can see, they're pretty much the exact same size, and the reason I bring this up is because that's the top plate. This is the battery for a quad like this that you're gonna wanna fly long range. And you see how it's just massive on the top of the quad. And the reason I bring this up is just a weight distribution, and it limits the size of batteries that you could run. So I'll pop up a picture of something like the Chimera 7, and the top plates on those quads are humongous because people will run 2,000–3,000 milliamp hour lithium ion batteries, or they'll run a 10,000. On a quad like this, I'm not sure. Well, obviously you can't run a gigantic battery, but we'll see how it is, and we'll see how it turns out. So let's get into building it. Just using that to bring them in, and then we will tighten them the rest of the way by hand to make sure we don't over tighten anything. This is my first time building this frame, so I'm not going to go in and over tighten anything or put Loctite on anything, just in case I am putting anything together wrong. So what I'll do is get the frame together, make sure I know how it goes together, and then I'll come back and pull all the screws, Loctite everything, and then tighten them up just to make sure that I'm doing it right the first time, and I'm not undoing anything that I don't need to. So this is the cool design about this frame, is it uses this little wedge piece to actually lock the arms in. So I'm going to go ahead and get it started, and then you could come in, take your arms, rear arm, front arm, and then once you run in this little screw on the side, if you could get your driver into the hole, once you run that in, that actually wedges the arms in place, and then they'll be secured in those two holes. So just like the other side, I'm gonna go ahead and start running the wedge in to make it easier. Then I'll take my rear arm, front arm, hold it in place, and we're going to run the wedge in. Make sure everything's dropped down, and we'll snug it up just a little bit. Again, I'm not over tightening anything right now just because I am going to go back, Loctite everything. I just want to get the frame in place. So that's holding right now. And you can see how big this frame is. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and get our standoffs in place. Make this a little easier on myself. So that's the last standoff installed. If you do have issues lining up any of the 4 standoffs, what you can do is just loosen the wedge and then move the arm a little bit just to make sure you have the hole lined up, and then the screw should go through. So that's the standoffs. On to the next step. Alright, we're going to install the camera cages now. Weirdly enough, the camera cages only use one M3x6 screw on the bottom, and then has 2 on top, which will hold it all in place. Alright, so that's the camera cage installed, just 2 M3x6 screws from the bottom. On to the next step, which should be the rear standoffs. And then our rear standoffs are the same thing. It's just going to be a 1 M3x5 screw coming from the bottom. It looks like you use the top plate to line most of this stuff up, so I'm just kind of eyeballing it. And then I assume when the top plate and then the rest of the accessories come in, everything lines up. Before I forget, let's get our arm braces on. That is one side on. Alright, so that is the arm braces on. Arm braces are specific to the 7-inch build. Let's move on to the next step. And next, we're going to put the top plate on. Top plate is on the quad. Now let's install the rear mount for the quad. There it is. Majority of the frame has been put together. There's still a couple little things I have to do, like the battery pad has to go on, the O3/O4 mount has to go on. I have to decide what antenna mount I'm going to do, but I'll decide all of that as I'm actually doing the build. Once it's fully assembled, the proportions actually aren't that bad, especially once this XT60 and GPS holder is mounted onto the back. The quad's not going to look that bad. In my mind, I honestly was exaggerating the proportions a little bit, and I just had the image of the Apex 7-inch stuck in my head, where the body is like way shorter than the arms, especially because how far out the arms stick on the Apex 7. I will also pop up a picture of the Chimera so you could see that the body does come all the way to the back of the arms, but in this case, it's not that bad. Yes, I won't be able to run batteries as big, but honestly, just in the moment, I was exaggerating the issue a little bit. The frame doesn't look as goofy as I thought it did. It's hopefully going to perform well. We'll see what I could do battery wise, but it's not a bad looking frame. Off camera, I did go ahead and put Loctite on all the bottom screws and the arm screws, so those are all locked down. I also went ahead and figured out how I'm going to mount the O4 into the frame. which is funny because they sell a separate mount for the O4 camera, but the mounting bracket for the VTX doesn't exactly work because it's still designed for the O3. So I'll get into that now, how I actually made that work for this frame. So just try to stick with me because this is going to be a lot of numbers. But what I ended up doing was using the O3 bracket that's included in the kit. This is because the bottom plate is drilled out for 20 by 20 in M3 and 25 by 25 in M1.6. The O4, unlike the O3, uses M2 screws to mount. So it's either going to be too big or too small. So what I did was mount the bracket to the frame using the 20 by 20 M3 holes, and then I drilled out the M1.6 holes of the frame and the bracket to M2. So by drilling out the M1.6 holes to M2, I could actually run M2 screws through the bottom of the frame, the bracket, and then into the O4 air unit, and then sandwich the whole thing together and close the O4 up. What I could have also done was flip the O4 air unit upside down and then use the pre-drilled holes for M3, and then I could have put like a washer on the screws or like a reducer on the screws so it doesn't wobble around as much. I could have also just used double-sided tape on the bottom and then stuck the whole thing in the frame, but I really like the look of this gold bracket. It matches the rest of the frame, so this should work. I shouldn't have any issues because it is screwed down and secure. We'll see what happens. Maybe I will just put a little bit of double-sided tape over these screw holes just to hold it in place, but we'll see what happens. So in order to get this VTX mounted in, I am going to use these M2 by 16 screws. They are going to be nice and long to go through the frame, the bracket, and then have pretty good thread engagement on the air unit itself. So first thing we got to do is actually open up the air unit. We're going to take these UFL connectors off for the stock antennas. We'll put in our UFL to SMA connectors, and then we'll get the whole thing bolted down. I went ahead and took it apart just so you could see, but the outer holes were M1.6, drilled them out just a little bit, and now the M2 screws actually fit through. So little simple fix, and we'll get that installed now. So the O4 does actually go into this quad pretty easy once you have it figured out. So as far as the camera in the front, gummies go in the front, not the back, just the front. And then to get the camera in, what I did was I took one half off, put the little M2 screws through the gummies, through the carbon fiber plate into the camera. And then on the other side, I was able to just line it up and sandwich the whole thing together. If you want to adjust the up tilt of the camera, all you're going to do is loosen the back 4 screws and you could adjust the up tilt. The camera does poke out just a little bit, but I'm not too worried about it because, knock on wood, this is a long range quad and it should never be crashed. So then moving on to the back of the quad, I will point out the obvious. My UFL to SMA connectors are way too long. They're only going to go to about here, and I will have all that extra. So I'm going to order shorter ones off Race Day Quads tonight, and I'll get those installed after the fact. But just to get the build together, we are going to use the longer ones. And then as you can see, the VTX is dropped in nice, and I am not worried about that going anywhere. Now that the O4 is in the quad, we can move on to getting the ESC into the quad. This is going to be a fun little project because, as you could see, the ESC has a massive capacitor on the back of it, so it's not going to allow it to just drop down in front of the O4. So what I saw one guy do is he actually desoldered the capacitor and then he mounted it on the underside of the quad. So that's what I'm going to try to do. I should be able to just double-side tape and then zip tie it in, and it's protected by the frame and it'll relocate it nice there. You could also try to put it in front of the ESC, but in putting it in front, it takes up the space for your receiver because you're going to want your antenna up in the front. So I'm going to get that taken care of now, then drop the ESC in, and we should be able to move forward from there. And there it is. As you could see, this quad barely fits in frame, but we're gonna make it work. So all 4 motors are soldered onto the ESC with their LEDs in line. I tried to do this as neat as possible and just take my time with everything, because this quad should be flying out around 5 miles, so I don't want any issues or any second guesses. So I just took my time with everything. And then the capacitor is also routed on the bottom of the quad. It doesn't tuck in as nice as I would like to, because the capacitor is a little larger than expected, but it's double-sided taped and then zip tied to the frame. Then the little leads come up through the frame to the back of the ESC, and then I used electrical tape just to protect those connections. I would have liked to use like a heat shrink tube, but I couldn't get a piece around there, and then with the O4 in here, it's just a whole little hassle. So now I have to take the O4 out because I completely forgot to put the wiring harness on. We'll be able to drop the flight controller in and then wire up our receiver, and the quad in theory should be done. I did go ahead and get the the new SMA connectors ordered, so those will come in eventually. But as far as for first start, that'll work, and then we have to get the plug soldered on. So a little bit more work to do, but next we should be able to get everything wired into the flight controller. Admittedly, I'm not really sure how it got here, but I will do my best to explain it. So the flight controller did get dropped on, and then after dropping the flight controller on, I managed to make a very short wiring harness for the VTX and the flight controller, because using this wiring harness would be just way too much stuff bundled up. So I made a much shorter cable that will just get tucked in and plugged straight into the flight controller. And then the bulk of the project was actually getting this XT60 plug on the back. And I'll be honest, it was 100% my fault why this was such a pain to do. On the bottom, you could see where the 2 wires are soldered onto the XT60 with the heat wrap tube. So what had happened was, when I was tinning the wires, I put a little too much solder on them, and the solder is going to chase down the wire. And with the addition of the heat wrap tube, it made it really hard to bend these wires once I put the XT60 plug on. So what I ended up doing was just switching the angle of the bracket so it's not as harsh of an angle. And then eventually, with just time, patience, and bending, I got it all in. And then I also managed to run the GPS wire under the VTX, and that'll come out, I'll pull a little more, it'll come out under the carbon fiber plug into the back of the GPS, and then that'll all get wrapped around. And then I also figured out what we're gonna do for the XR4. So of course, this is a dual antenna receiver. So the first antenna, there's a spot under the camera right here to get zip tied in place. So that'll fall in nicely, and that'll cover my antenna on the horizontal plane. And then for the second antenna, ideally you want it on the vertical plane. So I wasn't sure in the beginning what I wanted to do, but I decided I want it to come off of this standoff right here like this. But the issue is propeller clearance. So after a little digging, I did find a mount for a different quad, which is intended to be put on the standoff and hold the antenna. It wasn't for the XR4 dual band antennas, but it was for a 900 megahertz antenna. So I ended up modifying this one. This was my first rendition, which actually slipped over the standoff like I needed, and then the antenna drops right in. Even though this wasn't meant for these antennas, it actually holds the dual band antennas perfectly. But the issue I was having is, you can see when it's straight, the propellers are gonna hit that. So definitely don't want that. So after a little modification, I did come up with my final version. All I did was shorten this distance right here and then bring the top plate a little bit over, and it's gonna drop right onto the quad, and it'll hold my antenna perfectly. I did put a little bit of electrical tape on the inside to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. So then the antenna will drop right in, and it's meant to be zip tied around the top and then glued in from the bottom, and clears perfectly. So let's get everything plugged in, the GPS on, the ELRS mounted in, and then we should be good. So before I actually get the GPS mounted on the quad, I want to make sure I have enough wire, because I am going to the back of the quad and the GPS pads are not on the top. They're actually on the bottom of the flight controller. And when we flip it over, the pads are actually on the back of the flight controller. So that means I don't actually need as much wire up here I could pull more wire to the back and actually mount the GPS how I want to. This GPS is a little bit big for the provided carbon fiber pad, but what I am just gonna do is put a bunch of double-sided sticky tape on here, stick it down where I need it, and then with the heat shrink tube that they include, wrap that around, and it should be good. Worst case, if it falls off, I guess it's held on by the wire, but it should hold in place. So I'll get the GPS mounted there, and then like I said before, I have enough slack on the wires to pull them because they're just going right to there. So let's get that mounted in place now. So I went ahead and put an antenna on just to be sure, but it looks like from the back of the quad up and then all the way to the flight controller, I should have just enough wire to solder because the pads are just right here. So let's get this soldered on, and then the GPS will be ready to go, and then after that we'll get the receiver in. Pro tip, when you're dealing with this many wires, make yourself a little cheat sheet with all the colors and where they go. I'm not sure how much you'll be able to see of this, but we're gonna give it a shot and we're gonna get the GPS soldered on. That's most of the wiring taken care of. Really happy how it came out in the back, very neat. I will just neaten up that front cable. Now let's get the receiver in. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but for a quad with this much packed into it, it's probably one of the neatest builds I've ever done. Functionally, everything is in. There are just a couple little things that I need to button up, like the antennas on the back. Once I know that the GPS is 100% working, I will put the heat wrap on it. But all in all, the quad is together, and I should be able to give you guys a first start right now, and then I'll be able to go in and do everything in beta flight. So let's give you guys that first start, and hopefully it works out right. Short saver is an absolute must when starting up this quad. It was about 5 days worth of work to get to this point, so I'm finally gonna do it, get it over with. And the quad is good. So next thing that I'm gonna do is get the top plate on, get everything neatened up. Like I said before, the antennas are going to be left till later when I have the new SMA wires, but the next clip for you will be the quad completely buttoned up with the exception of maybe the antennas, and then we'll get a first flight in. Alright, Big Bird is now, yes, we're going with the name Big Bird because it is humongous. Look at the difference in size between this 5-inch quad and our 7-inch quad. Propellers are gigantic. So Big Bird is now 99% of the way there structurally. The last little 1%, like I mentioned before, is the little SMA wires, and then just putting the heat shrink on the GPS. So 99% of the way there structurally. I did manage to get the quad plugged into beta flight. It is about 95% of the way there software wise, so the GPS is all set up. I do have to do fine tuning with the return to home, but I'll get that done once the quad is actually in the air. I have to sit down and tune the quad, which is going to be a whole other beast because I've heard these 7-inch quads have vibration issues. So we'll see if I actually have to balance the propellers or what I have to do to get around that. Hopefully we're good and we don't have to deal with any of that. And then last but not least, with my XR4 and my RadioMaster Nomad, I just need to make sure I'm using all the right settings to have the best balance between range and latency. So right now I'm using X150Hz, which is going to use both the 2.4 and 900Hz, which will give me a nice little balance between range and latency. I just got to play around with the settings and see what I actually like, but that's going to be flight dependent. So once this quad is 100% done and I have a bunch of flights on it, I am going to sit down and just do a full review of the frame, the build, and just say what I would do different. I don't know if I mentioned it, but this frame was $155, and before I even flew it, I've noticed a couple things that I would change. So I'm just gonna sit down, take note of those, and I'll make another video about that. But for right now, we do actually have to get in the air, get our first flight. So I will leave you with the video of the first flight, and I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching. As always, if you have any questions, leave them down below in the comment section for me, and I will get back to you. And thanks again for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.